Welcome to Hidden Costs and Smart Savings. I'm your host, Melissa E. Kiefer, and we are going to be talking about real stories, hidden costs, and simple ways to keep money in your pocket.
Hi friends, this is Melissa Kiefer, the Money Mindset Coach, and I wanted to talk to you guys about hidden costs and smart savings. So I do have a guest with me here, Jill Piazzi with Gray Matters, and we are going to be talking about the real costs of elder care. So guys, this is a personal topic for me. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer and then later with dementia, we did not know how to navigate the situation. We didn't know whether we should go with caring for mom in the home or assisted living or going into a personal care home. We didn't know what was covered by Medicare and what was out-of-pocket expenses. We didn't know which facility to choose, and we didn't know that there was such a thing as aging in place rather than having to transition from place to place. We also had some challenges with financing because we weren't expecting some of these exorbitant costs to come up. So that's why I've got Jill here. We really want to help you guys avoid some of the pitfalls and the mistakes that people often make when they're looking at caring for an elderly or an ill parent. So welcome to the show, Jill. We really appreciate you. So why don't you share a little bit about your background and what got you started in this field?
Yeah, so I'm what's called an aging life care manager. They used to call us geriatric care managers. About 10 years ago, we had a rebranding in our national association, the Aging Life Care Association. But I am kind of a strategist and caregiver coach, and I'm also mainly an advocate. I'm here to work with older adults and families and help them just navigate all kinds of things related to aging, whether it be aging in place or whether it be financial, costs to pay for care. And also I specialize in dementia, Alzheimer's and diseases like that. So
it's such an important area, right? And we don't really always plan for having things like dementia, so it's good to have somebody who can kind of help guide you through that process. There's definitely a need there. So when families first come to you to talk about their aging loved one or their ill loved one, what's a common misconception that they do have?
I think one thing I see is that they assume that Medicare is going to take care of everything. Unfortunately, that's been a myth for quite a long time. Medicare is the program that if we paid into Social Security and we've earned typically like 10 quarters, that we're eligible for Medicare. So some people take it early and then take their Social Security early and they get on Medicare, and some people wait till 70. But a lot of people have heard that Medicare is going to take care of things. And so unfortunately, it's typically used for your doctor's appointments, and it's also used for hospitalization. But when we have a crisis, let's say like a hip fracture or stroke, typically it's only paying for skilled care like home health that comes in to do therapy, or it's paying for rehabilitation. But it is not paying for the day-to-day services like in-home care, caregiving, or homemaker services.
Yeah, that we learned that lesson the hard way. We thought that home health was actually going to take care of the caregiving pieces too, and that was going to be covered entirely by Medicare. And we were surprised with the additional cost of caregiving services to really provide all the care that we needed to in the home. Yes. So that is a really good tip there. So we do have some hidden expenses that families do face. And so what are some of the biggest hidden or unexpected? We just briefly talked about some of that, but is there anything else that you can think of that?
I think just being aware of, costs that are not covered, even if you are, let's say, on home health, or you're getting, like therapies in the home. Some people have heard that like hospice covers a lot, and yes, they do, but there are some things that they will not cover. So for example, I've had a client that was on hospice but still needs some speech therapy because she has cerebral palsy. Well, typically you cannot bring in rehabilitation services with hospice. But I did find out that hospices are required to cover that cost, especially if that helps the individual with communication. And she's losing that ability. So I kind of held this hospice to task and asked that they find a speech therapist, even though they did not have one contracted. So it's really just asking the questions of, let's say, a social worker with a home health or hospice. And also speaking with your doctor, you know, what is covered under your insurance, whether it's an Advantage plan under Medicare or traditional Medicare. But I think hidden costs too are what it costs to be in the home and age in place. You know, sometimes people think again that Medicare is going to pay for that provider service, and that is out of pocket. Most agencies in San Antonio and surrounding areas are charging about $30 to $35 an hour with a 4-hour minimum.
Yeah, and that's at this point in time, guys. That's not in the future where costs could potentially increase due to inflation and other factors, right? And one of those hidden costs that we realized was even working with a hospice care provider, there's only some medications that they're going to take care of. And then if we want her to have additional comfort with these other medications that are not typically required, that's out of pocket to us. So, you know, we have to figure out how to pay for those additional things. So it's one of those areas that you could probably keep talking about forever because there's so many of them. And so, you know, again, finding that information, doing your research, doing your homework, talking to somebody like Jill, you know, asking the right questions to whichever facility or location you're going to look at for that kind of thing is really helpful. So I had this challenge. I had to wrestle with, do I take care of mom at home? Or there was this great brand new facility that was opening up. They were still building it. It was right around the time of COVID, right before COVID. And we were gonna, you know, just jump on that and be a founding member and get a really discounted price and all of these additional perks and bonuses. And then they had a slowdown in the building, and then when they did open, they had a lot of restrictions for the residents, and we just felt like it wasn't the right time, right? So I decided to take care of mom at home with the help of a part-time caregiver that would come in, which was an out-of-pocket expense for us. And what I didn't know was the part-time caregiving costs were pretty expensive, and there was a lack of resources, so we would not have that consistent, steady stream of care that we were looking for. So ultimately we got fired as a client, you know, because there were people that were a little bit more in need, that were in, you know, different types of settings that needed round-the-clock care. So when we're talking about taking care of somebody at home, or moving them into assisted living, or moving them into a private care facility, what is something that you might, you know, consider?
Well, for example, I'm working with a family today that is part of our conversation. Do I age in place or do I move out? And sometimes it's hard when it's a couple, because one, especially the caregiver, might be tired and they're like, let's move. And then the care receiver might say, I really wanted to stay here. I wanted to die in my home. And I'd say that that's pretty typical of what I hear. In my 34 years of working with older adults, I've heard, I want to die in my home. Or you're going to take me out feet first. You know, I've heard it that way too. But I think, you know, one thing that we need to think about is, if I need a lot of care, first of all, I say, you know, how does this work for both of you? If I have the burden of being the caregiver, then my own health starts to decline. And I've told my clients, well, if your caregiver is down, then you're not going to have the help. So both of you cannot be out of pocket here. So it's looking at that piece, but also looking at the cost. So if you have to have 24-hour care, that's going to be more exorbitant than if you move into an assisted living. And I'd say the average out there today, you know, it can range, but you're looking at about $4,500 a month. And that's not your total cost, man. You know, you've got incidentals. If you're incontinent, you're paying for your products. You're paying for snacks if you don't like the food. You're paying for your medications, because again, you know, there's out-of-pocket costs.
Transportation costs
transportation
to and from
sometimes.
Hospitals or
they have a radius that they cover. So assisted livings might say, we're going to cover this 5 or 10 mile radius around our building. Well, then if you have to go to some place like medical center or somewhere out of your way, then you are paying for that service maybe through a contracted transportation service. Yeah.
Absolutely. And can you give me an example, because of a family that's come to you where, you know, you talked to them and you helped guide them in this process, and they were able to save themselves some money in, you know, in making that choice and then transitioning their parent however they needed to do that.
Yeah. So thinking of a client that I had, I was with her for about 6 years. So I was with her through all the hard times and caregivers leaving and all kinds of stuff. She was receiving 24-hour care, and she did have funds at one point. I mean, she had invested, and this is someone that worked really hard, and she's a retired doctor, but, and despite even having a long-term care insurance policies end. You know, they don't go long-term unless they're unlimited, and those policies today are almost unheard of. But her policy was ending, paying for 24-hour care in her apartment. Finally, the stepson said, you know, Jill, we're at a place. So it was okay, let's cut this off now before everything is gone on the assets. So we moved to a care home, and there was quite a savings. And of course, we let go of the caregivers except for one that helped her transition in the beginning and kind of visit weekly. So we eliminated 4 different caregivers and really reduced her costs. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love reduced costs, guys, honestly. And when we do enough planning and when we're talking to the right people, we get to reduce those costs considerably. So planning ahead is important. But before we get into planning ahead, I just want to ask a question. There's so many programs out there that are available to people to help with financial assistance in different situations. Like Mom, we worked through the VA to get her qualified for the VA aid and attendance program. But that program, just getting the paperwork right and getting it set up and everything, took over a year for her to receive. And so in the meantime, she had a gap in her income to, you know, to her rental and medical costs. So can you talk a little bit about maybe just a couple of resources that people can look into?
I think one of the best kept secrets is our Alamo Area Council of Governments that has the Area Agency on Aging under their umbrella. Area Agencies on Aging, we have the Alamo, which is covering New Braunfels and outlying areas, and then we have Bear, which covers Bear County. They have a program, it's called Alamo Service Connection, where you do the intake, and then you can ask for caregiver support. And through that program, people can get respite. So a caregiver can get about 8 weeks of respite that is free, and it says not income qualified. Sometimes it's a little challenging because, you know, companies that they contract with may be busy, and they are giving them they're getting paid a reduced rate. The other thing that this program can do is incontinence products. They'll do about 6 months through a contractor of briefs, bed pads, and wipes. Same thing with nutritional products. If someone is compromised in their nutrition, they'll do the supplement drinks. They also do grab bars. I mean, there's a lot of things people don't realize, so that could be a savings.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I just learned about recently through a colleague, there's been things like care.com where people pay someone privately. There's pros and cons to that because you're the employer. Are you willing to take the risk? Do you have the right insurance to cover that person if something happens, or workman's comp issues?
Right, and are you filing the right tax forms in regards to that too?
Right, but you do save money going through someone privately. And so there are companies that are registries where they're doing tons of background checks, they're doing all the legwork. You are paying a fee for that administrative cost, but you're paying less per hour for that service.
Sure.
So that could be helpful until something like aid and attendance starts up.
Right.
Or a long-term care insurance policy.
Exactly.
With long-term care insurance, you usually have a 90-day elimination period. While you file that claim, that person is waiting 90 days and having to pay out of pocket.
Exactly. And guys, talk to me about alternatives to long-term care policies as well. Because I do work with some financial products that can really help you save for that eventuality for your loved one or even for yourself, in a way that you don't have a lot of restrictions and you don't have gaps kind of in that coverage type of a scenario. So that's another potential cost savings for you. And you have more control. So
that's important. We want control.
More control over our own care and the care of our loved ones is always important, guys. Planning ahead. So for someone who's just starting their journey, so maybe they have a family member who's just fallen ill or gotten a diagnosis and they just don't know where to start, or maybe even they just hit a certain age milestone and we're thinking ahead going, oh my gosh, we haven't saved anything for this. How do we manage this? What are some things that they could do that aren't overwhelming, just little things?
Right. So I think the words you use are key. So I'm doing a lot of talks lately on planning ahead. How do we talk to our parents? This isn't something we were taught, right? It's like our parents have always been in charge, they took care of us, but sometimes that role reverses and it's like, okay, how do we start asking them, where are your financials? Hey, if something happens to you, how do I get on your account to help pay bills? Where are your passwords? So those are conversations to have now. And I'm not saying when someone's 80, when your parents old, like start having it now, because things happen to us at any age. So we do need to be having open conversations. I joke with clients that this isn't always fun sitting around the table conversation, but it is necessary so that we can protect ourselves and our loved ones. So I think sharing information, a big thing I like people to do is to also share medical information. We don't talk about what are our diagnoses and medications we're on, but if I need my husband or someone to step in for me, if I can't communicate or I can't make decisions because I have dementia, does that person really understand what my medical needs are? And who are my docs? What is all this?
Yeah, can I also comment on dementia? So one of the challenges that we faced with Mom was before we even knew she had dementia, she was spending compulsively. She was making really poor financial choices. She was forgetting purchases that she had already made and then trying to dispute as fraud with credit card companies and trying to manage all of that. And it became a kind of a constant battle to try to make sure Mom was still feeling independent and knowledgeable about her finances, while also trying to make sure I was protecting her from any sort of financial loss. And it did come down to where we had to create an irrevocable trust for her, and we had to put some things in place to make sure she didn't have the credit cards. And it was, it was a very difficult time, right? So talking to your parents about how this may go if they lose some of their mental faculties, but they're not aware that they have.
Exactly.
And so that's a great point.
That's why it's critical that we get all of our legals done while we're still have capacity, right? So that's doing your will. Yes. Sometimes that has to be reviewed, but who's your powers of attorney for medical and financial? Did you get that lined up? Right. And also, what is your advance directive state? What are your medical wishes? But yeah, it's just all about communication and having these tough talks and protecting that loved one and saying, okay, can I go ahead and get on your account now in case something does happen so that I have access? Because every bank's different. I've gone with clients to multiple banks in one day, and one wants the power of attorney, one wants you to fill out their forms. And so it is a learning experience for sure.
And we definitely need a guide through that process. We need people that are knowledgeable here, like Jill, to really help us make sure we're not missing key, critical, important steps in this process, so that we can, protect our families, but also ourselves, like our peace of mind and our emotional and physical toll that sometimes, caring for someone, a loved one, can take.
Yes.
So, it is emotional, it is financial. We do have, such a big, a big overwhelm and burdening kind of a feeling sometimes in regards to this stuff. So when you can have those conversations early, those emotions don't always get into it as much, and so you're able to make a little bit more logical, rational decisions and choices going forward. So early is better. For those of you who are watching, if you do like this video and you would like to see more of Jill, you would like to see more of me, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I will be doing a series, so we'll be talking to other small business owners that are going to help us find hidden costs that are associated with things that we use or need every day. We're also going to look at money savings tips. So those are going to be the topics that we're going to have. And Jill, I'm just so impressed with how much you know.
Well, you
and
too.
you're a tremendous,
you.
you're a tremendous resource for the community. So how can people find you if they want to connect to you?
So you can call my cell. I'm a solo practitioner, so you're not getting a secretary, which probably be nice to have at some point, but you can call me at 210-363-3554, or you can find me, my website is Gray, Gray Matters, Matters, care.com, so graymatterscare.com, or you can email me at graymatters64@gmail. So either way, and I do texting, so either way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for Jill, guys.
Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Thank
We will
you.
see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.